President Trump's phone call with the president of Ukraine, in that call urging him to open an investigation connected to his political opponent, Joe Biden, noting in the conversation the U.S. had done a lot for Ukraine. And tonight, the timing. The president and the Ukrainian leader were set to meet today, even before the headlines broke. And so they did. What they said, and President Trump, before the cameras just moments ago, furious Speaker Pelosi has taken this very rare step. John Carl and Mary Bruce standing by. Also breaking tonight, the whistleblower's report that started it all. The person within the intelligence community who was so concerned. That report has now arrived in Congress. What it reveals and what we've learned. Also tonight, 24 hours after President Trump spoke of Iran's, quote, bloodlust. Tonight, the president of Iran in front of the world at the UN. And right after, one-on-one with us. We press him, was Iran behind the Saudi oil attacks? And is the U.S. and Iran now headed toward a major conflict? The other news this Wednesday night, Tropical Storm Karen slamming Puerto Rico. And now the loop, the turn, could it make its way right into the East Coast? Rob Marciano with the track. The developing headline at this hour, the CDC is now set to issue new and very alarming numbers. Deaths and illnesses linked to vaping. And the shakeup tonight at Juul. And why the new Joker movie is raising concerns about possible mass shootings and what authorities are now saying.
This is ABC World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening tonight from the UN here in New York City, where President Trump and world leaders have gathered all week. But tonight the focus is on the president and his phone call with the president of Ukraine, who right now is also here in New York. Tonight, we now have the transcript of that call, and on it, President Trump says, I'd like you to do us a favor. He goes on to later bring up his political opponent, Joe Biden. All of it with hundreds of millions in U.S. military aid being held. The White House released that transcript today, revealing the president repeatedly urged Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate his political rival. President Trump at one point saying, I would like to have the Attorney General call you. President Trump also mentioned his own personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, would be in touch. Today, less than 24 hours after the impeachment inquiry was launched because of that call, the two presidents side by side in New York, President Trump and the Ukrainian president, who said he felt no pressure from President Trump. Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying the transcript and the Justice Department acting in a rogue fashion confirmed the need tonight for an impeachment inquiry. And this evening, President Trump, before the cameras just moments ago, angrily denouncing Pelosi's move, using familiar words, calling it a hoax and a witch hunt. ABC's chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl leading us off.
President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky all smiles today as they met in New York. But tonight, all attention is on their phone call of 9 weeks ago. According to the White House summary of the call, President Trump directly asked the new Ukrainian president to coordinate with Attorney General Bill Barr to investigate his 2020 rival, Joe Biden. Early in the call, President Trump says, we do a lot for Ukraine. The United States has been very, very good to Ukraine. President Zelensky responds, you are absolutely right, thanking President Trump and adding, we are ready to continue to cooperate for the next steps, including buying American anti-tank missiles. Trump's immediate reply, I would like you to do us a favor, though. He then asked Zelensky to investigate an unsubstantiated theory about stolen Democratic emails, saying, quote, I would like to have the Attorney General call you or your people, and I would like you to get to the bottom of it, adding, it's very important that you do it if that's possible. Zelensky says one of his assistants had already been in touch with Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. President Trump then has a second request, and it's about Joe Biden. There's a lot of talk about Biden's son, he says. That Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that, so whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. He tells the Ukrainian president, I will tell Rudy and Attorney General Barr to call. Joe Biden's son Hunter was paid tens of thousands of dollars a month, serving on the board of a Ukrainian company while his father was vice president. But there's been no evidence of any wrongdoing. At the time of the phone call, President Trump was holding back nearly $400 million in foreign aid for Ukraine. Today, with the two presidents sitting side by side, the Ukrainian leader insisted he never felt pressured.
I think, and you read it, that nobody pushed me. Yes.
In other words, no pressure.
As for Joe Biden, today he responded saying, quote, the House must do its job and hold Donald Trump to account for his abuse of power. And with the House now launching impeachment proceedings, the president lashed out at Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
She's lost her way. She's been taken over by the radical left.
Later in a press conference, the president returned again to the question of impeachment.
It's a joke. Impeachment for that?
John Karl joins me live. He's also here in New York City tonight. And John, President Trump is still insisting that his phone call with the Ukrainian president was perfect. That was the word he used, and that he has nothing to worry about.
Well, yeah, David, that's the public posture. But even as he spoke words of defiance today, he appeared to me to be subdued, a little deflated. He held a press conference, but seemed determined to avoid any questions on this. He seems like a president still trying to process the very real possibility that he could be impeached.
John Karl leading us off tonight. John, thank you. And of course, this all started with a whistleblower inside the intelligence community who was very alarmed by that phone call. There was intense pressure on the White House to release that whistleblower complaint. Tonight, it has just been sent to Congress. It's being held in a secure room on Capitol Hill. And this evening, at least one leading Republican now saying, quote, there is a lot that is really troubling there. Mary Bruce on the Hill.
Tonight, members of the Intelligence Committee's filing into a secure room, getting their first look at the whistleblower complaint that sparked this crisis.
I found the allegations deeply disturbing. I also found them very credible.
The administration had tried to suppress the complaint, but today, facing mounting pressure, they gave in.
I fully support transparency on the so-called whistleblower information.
The move caps a day of high drama on Capitol Hill. Democrats outraged, saying Trump's call with the Ukrainian president was even more damaging than they had imagined.
That is an abuse of power. That is unpatriotic.
24 hours after launching impeachment proceedings, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi doubling down.
Today's release of the notes of the call by the White House confirms this behavior, which undermines the integrity of our election, the dignity of any presidency, and our national security.
Republicans largely standing by the president, downplaying the call. Senator, what do you make of this transcript and the president's actions?
Nothing there.
Nothing?
They're looking for a Mueller do-over.
There was nothing inappropriate in that conversation.
But tonight, there are a few cracks in that Republican support. Senator Mitt Romney calling the president's actions deeply troubling.
If the President of the United States asks or presses the leader of a foreign country to carry out an investigation of a political nature, that's troubling. And I feel that. And so...
Another Republican, Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, called the president's conversation with the Ukrainian leader inappropriate, but not impeachable. And then there was this from the president's closest ally in Congress.
So, from my point of view, to impeach any president over a phone call like this would be insane.
Well, Lindsey Graham just said to impeach a president over a call like this would be insane.
You know what? If that's his definition of insanity, I'd say, with all due respect to my chairman, he's already reached it.
Mary Bruce asking the tough questions up on the Hill today. And Mary, tomorrow, all eyes on the Hill again when the acting director of national intelligence will be testifying, and he'll face some tough questions for sure.
David, Democrats are telling us that this complaint is deeply disturbing and troubling, and they want to know why the acting director didn't stand up for the whistleblower and why he overruled the inspector general who found that complaint to be an urgent concern. David.
Mary Bruce with us again tonight, and in that call, as we've reported here, the president said, I would like to have my attorney general call you in talking to the Ukrainian president. But tonight, the Department of Justice saying Attorney General William Barr had not spoken to President Trump about this and that he has not been in touch with anyone in Ukraine. But tonight, so many questions, including the whistleblower's complaint. We now know it was referred to the Justice Department's criminal division, but did they investigate? ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas at the Justice Department.
Just as the White House was releasing that transcript of the president's call, the Department of Justice laying out what the Attorney General knew and when he knew it, bluntly saying Barr never spoke to the president about Ukraine investigating former Vice President Biden or his son. During that call, President Trump repeatedly suggested Barr work with Rudy Giuliani on a Biden investigation, saying, I will ask him to call you along with the Attorney General. Today, the Justice Department noting Barr learned of the call weeks later and was not involved, saying, quote, the Attorney General has not communicated with Ukraine, nor has he discussed this matter or anything related to Ukraine with Rudy Giuliani. But tonight, congressional Democrats are questioning Barr's independence and suggesting a cover-up.
You can see why the Department of Justice would want this transcript never to see the light of day. You can see why they have worked so hard to deprive our committee of the whistleblower complaint.
And Democrats have new questions about whether the Attorney General played a role in the Justice Department's decision not to pursue a criminal investigation of the president.
House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler says the president, quote, dragged Barr into this mess, and now the AG must recuse himself. But Justice Department officials scoffed at the notion today, saying this was done by the book, with Barr aware but playing no role, David.
Pierre Thomas with us tonight as well. Pierre, thank you. I want to bring in ABC's chief legal analyst, Dan Abrams, with us tonight. And Dan, because we have heard this over and over again from the president and his team over the last 24 hours, that there was no quid pro quo here, that the president never talked about the hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. military aid when he was talking about investigating Joe Biden. But you have said the pressure does not need to be that explicit here.
Well, that's right, David. As a legal matter, you don't need a quid pro quo. You just need to be able to prove the person knowingly solicited something of value from a foreign national to try to influence the 2020 election. But that kind of case is hard to prove and win. But the technical legal question isn't the most important one tonight. The real question is the political one. Sure, it would be a stronger case against the president if there'd been a specific statement or demand that linked dollars to help. But in the criminal law and in the impeachment process, a court, or in this case, the Congress, can certainly read between the lines. David?
All right, our legal analyst, Dan Abrams, with us tonight as well. Dan, thank you. Also this evening, just moments ago, my one-on-one interview with Iran's President Rouhani. 24 hours after President Trump spoke of Iran's, quote, bloodlust here at the UN. Tonight, the president of Iran in front of the world at the UN, and right after, the interview with us. We press him here tonight. Was Iran behind the Saudi oil attacks? And is the U.S. and Iran headed toward a major conflict? I also asked the president moments ago, is he willing to sit down with President Trump? President Rouhani, we heard you speak here at the UN today, and you said that Iran will not negotiate a nuclear deal as long as Iran remains under these sanctions. We know that the U.S. has doubled down sanctions against your central bank. And just today, the Trump administration announced new sanctions on the Chinese doing business with Iran. What's your reaction to President Trump?
Well, the Americans must think in the past 1.5 years in which they have put up extreme sanctions against Iran. What have they accomplished? What they're doing against Iran is to the detriment of America and to the detriment of countries that seek to enter into economic activities with Iran. In addition to the fact that the type of sanctions executed by the United States against the people of Iran is an economic form of terrorism, particularly because women, children, the ill, those in need of medication are most severely hit. And I am here to say today that this cannot continue.
We heard, Mr. President, today from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who again pointed to the downing of the U.S. drone, to the tankers in the Gulf, to the attack on Saudi oil facilities. The world has watched this escalation. Are we closer to a major conflict?
I do believe that we are approaching a worst point. We do believe that the main solution is to dry up the root that causes the tension. The Yemeni issue that has been ongoing for 5 years, that has subjected the Yemeni people to the daily bombardment and bloodshed of an aggressor.
President Trump here at the UN called Iran the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. He pointed to Iran's recent attack on Saudi Arabia oil facilities. Was Iran behind those attacks?
For the United States government, it has been embarrassing to have so many radars and so many systems purchased with Iraqi, Kuwaiti, Saudi Arabian money, set up these systems all over the region, all kinds of Patriot defensive and interception systems, and they haven't been able to intercept the incoming projectiles, the missiles, to shoot down those missiles. So it is an unfounded allegation.
But, Mr. President, you know that even France, Britain, Germany, who still